Hello everyone, and welcome. My name is Gabriela Becciarelli. I'm UX designer from São Paulo, Brazil, one of the organizers of this year's Talk UX, and a volunteer at Ladies.UX. For accessibility purposes, I'm going to describe myself. My skin is white, have bluish eyes. My hair is a darker shade of blonde. It's a straight and medium length. I'm wearing a yellow sweater, and I'm using gray headphones. In my background, there is 2 half moons hanging on a purple wall, one on each side. The lecture now is building design teams. The transition from individual designer to leader of designers can be challenging. The speaker journey from designing products and services to design organization was an eventful one, and she is ready to share what she learned along the way. From San Francisco, United States, Claudia Love, Head of User Experience at Cisco Cloud Security. She leads an international team of product designers, researchers, and writers responsible for building cloud security experiences at Cisco. She has been working on making enterprise softwares more human-centered for over 10 years across the United States and South America. She is passionate about design leadership and DesignOps. Welcome, Claudia. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you, Gabriela, for the intro. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. But before I do that, I'd also like to describe myself for accessibility purposes. I'm a Hispanic woman, 33 years old, brown eyes, brown hair, lighter skin, I guess. And I'm here at my home office. I'm wearing a dark shirt with white dots. And behind me, there's some nice paintings. And I am super excited to be here today. Let's start with the presentation. And
I'm going to leave you guys here.
Going to presenter mode. All right. And Gabriela, can you see my screen okay? Can you see my screen okay? And you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. All right, so as Gabriela mentioned, my name is Claudia, and I'm a design leader. I am here to tell you a little bit about that journey and what I learned along the way. If you are considering design leadership or you're a design leader already, hopefully some of this will resonate. I have some slides prepared, but I would also like to reserve time for questions at the end. So with that, a little bit about me. I'm originally from Montevideo, Uruguay. I was born and raised there. And that photo you're seeing there is one of my favorite buildings from my home city. I moved first to Houston, Texas in 2013, lived there for 3 years, and then I moved to San Francisco for my current job position, which, as you can see there, and Gabriela mentioned, is head of UX at the cloud security team at Cisco. So this is a team of product designers, researchers, writers, and actually we just added a DesignOps person recently. And we are in charge of creating cloud security solutions for Cisco customers. The products that our team works on are Cisco Umbrella and Cisco Cloud Lock. So a fun fact, I was supposed to be a biologist. When I first finished high school, I signed up for a biology major. And I did that for a couple of years until I realized that, it wasn't really my calling. I wasn't super excited about the career prospects. So I ended up switching to something that I was always very interested in, which is graphic design. My family was a little bit disappointed at the time, not anymore. And another fun fact is I'm actually a triple citizen. I'm Uruguayan by birth, I'm Italian by heritage, and I'm American by marriage. So I like to say that I have Jason Bourne status when it comes to passports. So you caught me at an interesting point in my career, because my first job was as a web and graphic designer back in Montevideo about 12 years ago. So half my career has been as an individual contributor, and half my career has been leading teams. So this is the first half. Started in a tiny agency doing web, print, booths for events, anything that a designer can possibly do, I was doing. Worked there for a couple of years. In between that position and my next one, I also tried the freelance life a little bit. It wasn't really for me. And then, while I was a web and graphic designer, I was doing primarily, like corporate sites, but I was always very interested in the web part. And I started getting interested in usability, which at the time, no one was really talking that much about it. I took a couple of classes in Montevideo and some training even in Buenos Aires, because I couldn't find many local resources. So I started getting really excited about it. And then I had this opportunity to join Globant, which is an international software company, as a senior UX designer. And this was my first job where I was actually designing software, and totally fell in love with it. Then after working there for a couple of years, moved to the States, to Houston, and I joined a company called Habwu as a UX manager. So that was my title, with the intention that, I was sort of like the team of one, and then eventually I was going to grow a team of designers. Unfortunately, that didn't materialize. So I took this other opportunity at a consulting company called Headspring, also in Houston. And then I had the opportunity, also came in as, UX team of one. But on this occasion, I did have the opportunity to bring 3 other designers on board. So I had that experience of building a team from scratch, which was really, really good. A couple of years later, I took this opportunity in San Francisco, joined Cisco as a product design manager of what was then a very tiny product design team, only 3 designers. And then, fast forward 4 years later, after a couple of positions, I now lead the UX organization, which is a team of about 15 people now, and we continue to add. We're hiring, so let me know if you're interested. And that's where I'm at today. So going a little bit deeper into some of those experiences, the first one that I wanted to touch on was the experience of building a team from scratch. Because it's quite different from inheriting a team, which I'm going to be talking about after this. So usually what this looks like is a company decides that they need to invest in design. It might be an engineering-driven company where most of the company are engineers. Someone, advocates for starting a design practice, and it always starts with one practitioner, right? And that person is going to have to do design work, even if the vision is for them to do just leadership. So what I found, and during my experience doing that, is that there's the design work and there's the evangelizing part, right? So doing the design work is great because you start accumulating wins. Essentially, back in Headspring, customers were happier with the outcomes of the projects where UX was involved. Engineers really, enjoyed working with UX. So it was pretty easy to sort of build support around, hey, we need more designers. Design is a good thing. But it also meant I had to, as a newish discipline in the organization, there was a lot of educating the rest of the company around, what is UX, what's the value of UX, how to work with designers, how does cross-functional collaboration work, setting expectations around designer responsibilities and what design is responsible for providing for. And then, once I was at that point where there was a lot of demand from design work, then the next step was to start hiring designers. So one of the decisions that I had to make is well, do I want to hire someone that specializes in research or in visual design, right? Some of the more specialized areas of UX. I find personally that when a team is small, the best investment is to hire generalists. So what I mean by that is if I think broadly of UX as user research, interaction design, and visual design. Someone that is very strong at interaction design, but that is also comfortable doing research and doing visual design. So that was sort of the profile that I was going for when I built that team. And it worked out, right? Like we were able to have these sort of central, like hybrid, like a centralized partnership, right? Like where we had a central design team, but each of the designers were paired with a team of engineers. In a perfect world, one team of engineers, usually like a couple because they were working a couple of projects at a time, and with a project manager or a product manager. So, you know, what I learned from that was that I was happy with that structure and that experience. And I actually carried that over to my next role. Like I said, when I first joined as the product design manager at Cisco. So inheriting a team is a little bit different, right? There's obviously people that have already been there. My team knows more about the product and the organization than I do. So I would rely a lot on their expertise and them teaching me what I needed to do. And at the same time, you know, like I took a period where I'm like, I'm not going to come in and just like change anything, even though I was like seeing some things that could be improved. I'm just going to like take it in and learn and assess the situation. What is the current interaction, like, you know, the situation with cross-functional collaboration? What are the designers working on? Are they, you know, what's their bandwidth like? There's a team stretch thing, which back then definitely was. And then once I sort of like got the lay of the land, moved into sort of reshaping, right? As the team grew, like that was the first thing that I had to do was like, okay, we're severely understaffed, need to hire other designers. So as the team started to grow, I started to basically, and this is like where the shift happens, right? Like from when you go from individual contributor to design leader, it becomes more around designing the organization, right? So I needed to design my design team, not just for today, but also for tomorrow, right? Like coming up with a strategy and a plan on how to grow the team responsibly. So, you know, I also started with that group of generalists, added a couple more generalists, and then started hiring people that were still product designers, but they had, you know, what I call a superpower, like they're really, really good at visual design, or they were really, really good at research, and started sort of, you know, shaping the team with those specialized roles a little bit. And the other thing that I had to be intentional about was the operating model. How do we structure the team? How do we work with our cross-functional partners? Career development plans, career ladders, standardizing the way we hire, right? And also process tools and ground rules. There was a lot of standardization. When it's a small team, it's easy because you don't really need to document that much. People just talk to each other. But as the team scaled, standardizing and documenting definitely became you know, a concern. And then after that is the fun stuff, like it's accelerate. Like, okay, so we have this core team, we're in good shape. Let's continue to grow. Let's continue to improve, and let's continue to basically expand the goodness of design across the organization. And that's when I entered sort of like the scaling and maturing, right? Like then it became deliberate to hire specialists. We officially appointed a user research manager and hired research specialists, right? That was a new capability that I created for the team. And then, you know, because of a reorg, we also, the writers responsible of the documentation of the product became part of the design organization. And, you know, right now we're working on like, okay, well, they are the documentation writers, but an opportunity that I saw is like, we really need like UX copywriters. So that might actually be the next specialized function that we explore. But for now, you know, working more closely with the writers, like where the designers and the writers are working together to craft the copy that goes into the UI. And there's also like growing responsibly, right? It's if the design team grows too fast, but engineering and product management are not really keeping up, right? Like there's only so much the designers alone can do. We need our cross-functional partners in order to execute. So there's always a balance right? And there's this constant communication so that we grow proportionally and we grow responsibly. And I do like to hire slow, right? Even though it's tempting, it's kind of like, oh, everyone's overwhelmed, we have to hire more people. Just taking our time to really be confident about hiring decisions and the people that we bring into the team. And also, something that I realized is that as a leader, you just have to be ready to adapt, right? The some of the ground rules and the structure that I set when the team was really tiny doesn't really scale anymore. So I had to change things along the way. For example, when I first started, the work was mostly localized in San Francisco and Vancouver. So we were predominantly a West Coast oriented team. But then as the cloud security group grew, we started having to work with engineers in Europe, in India, in Israel. So it made sense to start, what I call a design hub. So hiring a group of designers in Tel Aviv, ended up deciding on Tel Aviv to support those teams because there wasn't just a lot of time zone overlap with the West Coast, right? So I think it takes a constant sort of pulse check on how things are working operationally and how the culture is shaping up and changing and maturing and making changes accordingly. And I rely a lot on the feedback from my team directly. I feel like, as a team leader, I shouldn't be the only one giving them feedback. I also like to take feedback from them, and having that open two-way communication channel where they can always feel comfortable coming to me and telling me if something is not working. Hey, we should, get rid of this meeting. We should try this new process out. We should try these new tools. I think that's very, very important. And it builds that culture where people feel like they have a voice in the direction of the team and the work that we're doing. And this is sort of a parenthesis around hiring diverse teams. And I know that this varies depending on the geographic location, right? But in the States, there are some simple things that every manager should be doing. I think, on this topic, a lot of times hiring processes are driven by how, the company determines that they should be driven. But I always like to say each hiring manager is empowered to do things differently in the teams that they're hiring for if they feel like there's an opportunity. So, don't let anyone stop you. Some things that I was very intentional about doing was creating a diverse pipeline. So depending on the organization, some hiring managers might be working with a recruiter, and the recruiter is doing the sourcing for them. I always like to have a proactive role on that and do my own sourcing, and also review the candidates together with the recruiters and make sure that there's diversity even then at that stage. That's sort of like the foundation of it. Having diverse interview panels. As a hiring manager, I determine who is part of the interview panel that is going to interview a candidate. So I'm also very deliberate to make sure that there's different dimensions of diversity included in those panels. And definitely practiced interviewing, right? Like I think by now it's a fairly known fact that interview questions can carry bias. So, being also intentional about following a set of interview questions and trying to reduce bias as much as possible. Lessons learned. Something that I learned about leadership is that it's not for everyone. And this might sound obvious, but I always talk to like the senior designers around, once they hit that level, what do they want to do next? Do they want to pursue, becoming a very senior individual contributor, or do they want to try leadership? And I always encourage people to work in companies that offer both paths, right? Where like I've seen organizations where the only way to, move up the ladder is to lead teams, and you really have to like it, and you really have to have a passion for it. Otherwise, most likely that's the perfect environment that generates bad managers and bad leaders, right? So giving people both both tracks and the opportunity to grow their careers and what they're truly passionate about. I have some team members that are like, well, I think I like management, but I'm not sure. And that's fine. There are ways to sort of like experiment as a leader to figure out if you like it or not. And, working with your manager to make sure that that is possible. And if you don't like it, then you can always go back to design, right? I think some people even they do like it, but they miss designing, right? That's something that gets lost in the transition to management, where the higher you move, the further away from the craft you are. And some people are comfortable with that, and some people just miss it too much and they want to go back to a more hands-on role. That's totally fine. And then if you do become a manager, build your bench with designers that are interested both in the individual contributor track and also in the management track. And a former management of mine told me, when they left their jobs, like how important it is to have a successor in place. So thinking that even if you're not planning on changing jobs anytime soon, thinking about what that would look like, it's good for you and it's good for your team to have that successor appointed, or at least someone in mind that can take your place. Work on self-management. You can't really be a good manager if you don't manage yourself. And this is something that, I'm very, I have impulses. I'm very vocal and I like to vent, right? So there were things about just my nature that I had to learn to control in order to show up as my best self for my team. So, when you talk about emotional intelligence, there's a lot of focus on empathy, but self-management is also very important. And I think, again, that goes back to the importance of receiving feedback, that the leaders get that feedback from their teams and from their peers on things that they need to change about how they interact with people. And then, this is cliche by now, put your oxygen mask on first, but it really is true. If you don't take care of yourself, it's going to be really hard for you to take care of your team, right? If I'm not sleeping well, if I'm distracted, if I, show up to the office back when we showed up to the offices in a bad mood, then that might ruin someone's day, right? And it probably had nothing to do with them. So making sure that I'm showing up in a way where I can support my team. It starts with taking care of myself. So with that, I will stop talking and I will take some questions.
So now we have a question from Teresa Lux. Sometimes companies don't appreciate when designers name themselves generalists. So how do you think the designers can evaluate their skills in an interview? How to convince the company to hire them?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't run into that where generalists, I'm the contrary, in my experience, generalists are usually appreciated, but my advice, if that were the case, that breakdown of what we understand as design as being, part research, part interaction design, part visual design, and emphasizing those functions and positioning yourself as I can do all these things, but also making sure that you know how to answer what's your strength, right? Like out of those three, what are you strong at? So being a generalist to me gives you the opportunity to wear many hats and have a broader scope of work that if you specialize right away. As a matter of fact, as some advice that I give to designers that are early in their careers is to try to get that generalist job before they choose where to specialize, if they ever choose to specialize. So yeah, I mean, educate the people who maybe don't appreciate that term around what it really means, and demonstrate the value of it, right? Feel comfortable with describing it and how it's beneficial to an organization.
So big question, guys.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that you said, like, if you're not a leader, it's okay. Completely okay not being a leader. Oh my God, thank you.
Right. I think like traditional, the traditional organization structure in a lot of companies is like, well, if you want to grow, you need to manage a team, you need to become a manager. And like I said, I don't think that's necessarily the case. And not being a people manager doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be a leader. There's most senior individual contributors are leaders in their teams, right? Like they're subject matter experts. People go to them for feedback. They might ask them to like review. Actually, in my organization, we have a role for product design leads, and these are senior individual contributors who are responsible for a given area of the product, and they are responsible for overseeing the work that other designers are doing in the area of the product and making sure that the work is consistent and coherent. And they're not managing those designers directly, but they are leading them. And that is actually a good role to sort of like experiment a little bit with leadership without fully committing to it. Right. And then from there, like I actually one of our product leads recently took on the role of manager, and that helped him get sort of a taste of it.
Yes. What is the biggest challenge to deal with humans before professionals?
It is a different kind of stress. That's the way that I like to describe it, right? When you're a designer, the stress might be around deadlines or a difficult customer, right? Or like the amount of work that you're handling. But at the end of the day, you are responsible for your own successes and failures, right? Like it's you and your work, and that's your responsibility. When you start managing a team, your success depends on their success, right? Like I'm successful if my team is being successful and if they are being successful as designers or researchers or writers. So that's definitely a shift, right? And feeling comfortable with that. And then dealing with humans is dealing with humans, like a lot of the problems that managers deal with are human nature. Someone that might not be performing as well. So the conflict resolution, it's very fulfilling, but it's also a different kind of stress management that is required for it, and that's the part that is not really for everyone, right? Like some people don't like that. They're like, I don't want to deal with all that. I just want to deal with design. I'm a designer. Let me design, right? And that's totally fair.
Here, there is a look. In your view, what are the benefits of having a diverse team working on a production creation?
Many. And this is like, there are like people that are way more qualified than I am to talk about this, but this is like science, right? Like it's been proven that diverse teams produce better outcomes, right? Because you're bringing all those different lines of thinking, you're bringing people that problem solve differently, people that bring different experiences into the challenges. And if you build a diverse team and you do it right, like so I also like to talk about like culture fit and culture add, right? So culture fit is you hire people on your team that share your values, right? That they're aligned with the team values, and culture add is more like, does this person bring something different? Whether it's their background, their demographics, their work experience, or you name it, that we don't have in the team. Is it creating that level of diversity? And then what that generates is in an ideal situation, healthy conflict, right? Like healthy conflict is actually a good thing. If there's a problem and everyone in the team agrees on how to solve it, then like there's something wrong, right? Like there should be different opinions and different suggestions and different approaches for problem solving that are definitely enabled and facilitated by the diversity of the team.
Okay. Anyone else? No? Oh, here. I can deal with the delay on YouTube. Gabriela Rocha, what tips would you give to anyone who wants to work with UX?
Yeah, so this is, I guess, different depending on where you are and what you're doing currently. Like if you're a college student or if you're already into your career in some other field. For college students, the good news is that I feel like, at least since I went to school, there has been a lot of more new programs and training related to UX. I think the basics still are around digital design or graphic design, but at least in the States you have master's degrees around human computer interaction. I know that in Latin America there are like now specialized institutes and companies that teach UX, so there are a lot more resources available than they used to be. For someone that is transitioning from another career, I will say it's easier if that other career has something to do with design, even if it's industrial design, graphic design, even architecture, right? Because you already have sort of like the fundamentals, and then it's more of like a specialization, right? Like you're starting to specialize a little bit more in user experience. If it's a completely unrelated field, then it becomes a little bit trickier, right? There are obviously, all of these resources and courses and programs. But the problem that I see sometimes with folks trying to transition from other fields is not impossible, but, in parts of the world where it's competitive and they might be competing with people with a background, in actual design, it might become a little bit more challenging, to get that job. But, it's a combination of continuing to pursue that and build your portfolio and try to work on projects. Sometimes even for graduates of design careers and UX careers, what I recommend is, in order for them to build their portfolio beyond just the academic experience, there are nonprofits out there that need help, UX wise, with their websites or their tools. And help a nonprofit. You're doing good. You're building your portfolio. Definitely, the networking part and networking with peers is great, but whenever possible, try to network with leaders and hiring managers, right? And make sure that you're on their radar when they might be opening positions and they might consider some junior roles. So yeah, different paths depending on where each person is.
Okay. Monica Barros, I want to be a good leader. What are your advice to me?
It's a broad question. I feel like if I had to nail it to like maybe a few bullet points, that would be self-awareness. Know yourself, right? What are your strengths? What are your triggers? What is your leadership style? That self-awareness piece is like very, very important, and the self-management as well. And also empathy, right? Like empathy is critical, I think, for UX designers in general, right? Like it's part of our profession to empathize with the users and with the user needs. That applies to leaders as well with their teams, right? And I feel like getting to know your team as individuals, right, and not just as professionals. I feel like it's very important to generate a relationship of trust. And that goes back to my point around the importance of feedback and open communication as well. So usually if you're a good leader, you're gonna, you're not gonna do things like, I can tell you what a bad leader is. Like, you're not gonna take credit for your team's wins, and you're not gonna play the blame game when something doesn't go right, right? Like that's what a bad leader would do. You are happy for your team's successes, and you're perfectly comfortable with them getting the credit. You are approachable. You are able to have an open and honest communication channel with your team members, and you know yourself, and you have that awareness.
Teresa looks, how to keep a team motivated and inspired. What attitudes an exemplar leader should have?
Yeah, and this one is actually a good one because obviously different individuals are inspired and motivated by different things. So that part about getting to know your team as individuals is critical to understand what motivates them and what inspires them. And we talk about, with my team about what energizes you and what drains you, right? Or bucket fillers, and and understanding those for each individual team member. And and then, there's also, ironically, sometimes the highest performers are the hardest ones to keep motivated because, they might get bored or they don't feel challenged, right? So having that understanding and trying to align the team members' responsibilities with what they enjoy doing and what their strengths are, I think are key in driving motivation and inspiration. And then going back to hiring and how you build your team, right? Like, I think it's all of us can relate with part of, if you love your job, most likely part of the reason why you love your job is because of the people you work with. So being very careful and very intentional about building that culture, it's important. Even if you step away, like a team that loves to like work with each other and they trust and respect their peers are naturally gonna motivate and inspire each other.
What's your tip for a person interested in working with UX in the USA?
It's tricky these days with the current situation. I'd say, having worked in UX for the US in Latin America, I think there's a lot of opportunity, not just in Latin America, but also Europe, India, around working as a contractor, right? Working for US companies from your hometown or your home country. I feel like that helped me personally a lot when I moved to the States. I had some recognizable names in my resume from companies that I worked with before that I feel like helped me in my job search. So especially now in this, that was already the case. I'm talking about like 7, 8 years ago, almost 10. Oof. And when I was still in Uruguay, now it's only grown, right? And with this new reality of people being remote indefinitely, I think that opens a ton of opportunities for people around the globe to work for companies in the States or in Europe or in other places. And, hopefully once the world comes back to normal, then, there's there's a possibility of potentially relocating it. I feel like in the US, if you're not, I'm assuming the question is for someone that is not original from the US, working your English communication obviously is very important. So the better you speak English is definitely gonna help, especially for designers, right? Like there might be other roles where it's not that important, but in design, like you're expected to articulate design decisions and you're expected to get buy-in from stakeholders. So communication skills are super, super important. And I found that in general, in the US is a very results-oriented culture, right? So keeping that in mind around, show results, right? Like do the work, show your value, and that's a big part of it as well.
Okay. That's it for today. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Claudia, and sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you everyone for watching us. Stay tuned because in the next, I think maybe 20 minutes, from now we're going to start with another lecture of Eugenia Casabona from Argentina, Buenos Aires. She will be talking about cómo el coaching me ayudó a ser una mejor researcher. Sorry about my Spanish. And thank you so much, guys. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.